Hello to those out there listening, watching. Someone suggested that I do an HDR video for complete beginners. People who have heard of and of course have seen HDR, but they really don't know how to go about it. They're a little bit afraid of it. So, and just start from scratch. I'm going to explain what HDR is and then go through creating one and then, of course, tone mapping an HDR image. I'm going to use Lightroom, which is my cataloging software that I use. I also do some basic processing or image editing in Lightroom. It's a great program, but there's others out there. Whatever you're using, go to it and find the three. Here's a composite I did with an HDR background. Jason here, my subject, I shot in my studio with a 3-light setup and added him into the HDR image to create a composite. I do that quite a bit. I go out and shoot backgrounds, generic backgrounds, and then add people in for clients. Here are the 3 exposures we're going to be working with for this presentation. This first one here is what we're calling the zero source file. It's called a source file because your HDR image is a compilation or composite, whatever you want to call it, of several different sources. These are files, so there you go, they're source files. The zero source file means it's the exposure that your camera's processor metered. It's what the camera decided to take. When you pointed it at aperture priority mode, or whatever the Canon folks call it, at f9, it decided that 1/60th was the best shutter speed to get everything into exposure properly. As you can see, the darks, being the shadows, are far too dark, and the highlights are far too blown out, way too bright. So as you can see, the sensor did not, or the meter did its best, but not quite good enough. We want to see everything, all of the entire range of light in this one image. Now, how are we going to do that? We're going to create an HDR. If this is the zero source file, we're going to want to go and create a minus source file, which will expose for everything outside. And this one's going to go to -2. What I suggest for most HDRs is going from -2 to +2. What does that mean? 2 meaning 2 stops. A stop in the camera world simply means double. So our camera decided to take this at 1/60th of a second. So if we double that, we're going to go to 1/120th. If we double it again, which would be -2, it's 1/240th. The camera rounds to 1/250th. So as you can see over here, the -2 is at 1/250th, and that's done a really good job of exposing the highlights, the area outside. Now if we go to a +2, which is double would be +1, and that would be from 1/60th, where the zero source file is, +1 would be 1/15th, or I'm sorry, 1/30th, and then +2 would be 1/15th of a second, and that's where we are here. And as you can see, it's really done a good job of exposing, or properly exposing, all the shadowed areas. So what we want to do is merge these together and basically take the best of all 3 worlds. And the way we're going to do that is simply highlight these 3 images. And by the way, I shoot in RAW. Typically, during this process, I would clean these up and turn them into TIFFs or JPEGs, and then add them into my HDR software. But because I don't have time for that right now, we're simply going to take all 3 RAWs. We're going to drag them down into the Photomatics Pro software icon right here. Drop them in. I use Photomatics. It's my favorite. It's the fastest, and I think it does the best job. There's a bunch of different programs out there for creating HDRs. Go ahead and use whatever you want. I don't care. It's going to ask me what I want to do here. Well, I want to merge for HDR processing. I don't want to open any other files. So I'm going to click OK. It's going to name the 3 files that I just put in. I understand that. I could add more by browsing. I don't want to do that. I just want to click OK. Here I have some options in front of me. Number 1 is align source images. Yeah, it's really hard for me to do it myself, so I'm going to have the computer do it. And I'm going to do it one of 2 ways. The first one is to do it by using horizontal and vertical shifts. It doesn't always work so well. I personally like to choose by matching features. What it does is looks at key points of contrast throughout the image and matches them up between all three so that everything is clear and concise. As far as the shift, don't worry about that. Just leave it all the way down to 1%. You don't want anything shifting on you. Shifting is bad. We don't want shifting. Ghosting. If you have any movement in any of the exposures, it's going to create ghosting. I don't think I have to explain what that means. It's self-explanatory. And I like to do it automatically. Remove ghosts automatically with the detection high. You can do it selectively, which basically brings up a preview box, and you put a circle around the ghosting areas with your cursor. And it does an okay job, but to be honest, not that great. And it doesn't matter anyway, because I'm going to be masking into Photoshop my source files anyway, but that's a little bit more advanced. We're not going to talk about that now. For right now, all you need to consider yourself is remove ghost, automatic. Reduce noise, only if it's a night shot, and to be honest, I don't even do that anymore, or I haven't in a long time, so don't worry about that. Reduce chromatic abrasions, sure, why not? If you don't know what chromatic abrasions are, there's an internet. Go figure it out. White balance. I go with as shot because it doesn't matter. I'm going to adjust it all later. Work in Adobe RGB, please. You're going to save to sRGB before you take any image to print or upload to the internet, because that's the color space that those two things work in. Adobe RGB for all processing purposes is a much larger color space, and you'll get a lot better color out of your images. ProPhoto is even better than that, but it takes a little bit more time because it is so much more complicated. So I clicked OK or merge, whatever that was, and right now I'm converting all three images to HDR. It tells me that it's aligning the source images and creating an HDR. What it's going to create is something that we can't see. Today's, I think, what are they, 8-bit printers and monitors cannot see all of the colors and tonality that is produced in an HDR image. So what it's going to do is show it to me quickly and then take me to an area called tone mapping. The idea is we want to tone map it or color it and detail it back to whatever we want. We can be artistic, or we can do what I like to do, and that's simply try and recreate the photo I saw, or the image I saw when I took the photo. Always start at the default setting. What we're doing again is tone mapping the HDR. This simply is where a good place to start, default. It opens up in the spot you left it off, as far as all the little sliders here. Where you left them on your last HDR is where it's going to open up, but never start there. It's always a bad idea. Always start with default. Let's go through these real quick. We're going to go to tone mapping. Click that up here. It will already be clicked. It's the default. Method, detail, enhancer. If you want to screw around with the other things, do that on your own time. I don't. Strength. It's an HDR. I usually go all the way to 100%. It's pretty rare that I use less. Color saturation. Look, HDR, this program is about one thing and one thing only, and that's getting all of the light from your images, your source files, onto one exposure. That's it. It's not about creating saturation or detail. That's why you see so much bad HDR out there. People try and create all this drama in Photomatics. It's not the time or place. It's why they look so bad. We're trying to recreate what you saw with your eye. So to do that, I will bump up the color a little, because we shoot in RAW. See, when you shoot in JPEGs, the camera automatically, or the computer automatically, adds vibrance and saturation and things like that. So we're going to do that here. I go right to detail contrast, and I like to bump that up quite a bit, actually almost all the way up. Luminosity, we're going to start brightening it up. This is, I think, the most important slider. Lighting adjustments. Go all the way down here, and it gives you all the light. Go all the way down here, and it gives you none of the light. We want to find the area we're looking for. Slide it back and forth until I like that. I like that. It's a little bright, but that's okay, because we're going to add in, go down here to the blacks, your black point. You always want to add in some black. Just like you're decorating a room or painting a portrait or painting a landscape, always add black. It makes your colors pop, and it adds realism to whatever you're doing. But it's still a little too dark for me, so I'm going to bring up a little bit of the white point here. Also a little more luminosity. A little more white point. And I do remember the sun being a lot warmer than this. So the temperature down here, I'm actually going to bring up. And as you can see right away, it looks, well, it looks like what I saw today. Pretty much perfect. Ready to go. I'm going to hit process because this is the photograph that I'm happy with. It's not overdone, it's not super detailed, and it's not too saturated. I'm going to process it because what we were looking at there is a preview, and it was not perfect. There's a little bit of noise because it was a preview, but now it's going through. There you go. All finished. That's your HDR tone mapped image. It's really just that simple. Now go ahead and do with it what you will. What would you do with an image? Take it to Photoshop, work with it in Lightroom, sharpen it, add some saturation, add some crazy effects. It doesn't matter. It's just a photograph at this point. People tend to make too big a deal about HDR. It's just another technique to add light. If you had a team of lighting specialists with you, with booms and flashes and alien bees and all kinds of things, they would light it for you, but we don't have time for that. We only have a camera and a tripod, so we use HDR. That's what this is for, recreating light, the light that you cannot get from a single exposure. So that's it. It's really that simple. I hope I didn't ruin anything for you. I hope it was as easy as I think it is. And that's it. HDR for beginners. I've got some other videos on my YouTube channel to look at where I go through the entire processing of a pretty simple image. And pretty soon I'm going to start coming out with little tips and tricks, more videos, also about retouching portraits and things like that. But for now, this is it. HDR for beginners. If you have any questions, see me on Google Plus as Neil Kremer, Neilkremer. I'm also on Flickr as Neil Kremer, 500px as Neil Kremer, Facebook as Neil Kremer. I really don't like saying my name. I don't know why I'm doing it so much. You could buy any of my prints if you see anything you like at lightshedimagery.smugmug.com. But please try and follow me on Google+. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Thank you so much for your time. See you around.